Hello and welcome to the bonus content of A Voyage Without My Father. I am here with the author Dexter Moscow and have the pleasure of being able to call him Dex now, which means that we've gone through things together. Dexter, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, Elliot, for inviting me. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Well, what a journey it's been for a few days. How was the whole process for you?
It was demanding, I think is the best way of saying it, but you were very patient for all of the bluffs and errors that I made just to make this happen. And I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
Well, it sounds great already, I can tell you that. And you will know that if you've just heard it, because this is the final track on the audiobook. So it has been a journey. It's been an interesting process, and it's safe to say that only you could have narrated this book. Now, it does lead me to a question that does pop into my head, and that is, when you were writing this book, now it's obviously so beneficial for everyone who has gone through loss and grief and getting through that. Did you write it for other people in mind, or was it a healing process for you that just naturally lent itself to others?
It's an interesting point because so many people have asked me, was it cathartic? And I think that certainly elements of it were cathartic, and we can discuss the loss of a beloved pet. But I think that I had done so much work on myself and this grieving process that it certainly was something I wanted to write as a history, not only for myself, but for my brother's family, because he had always wanted to write the book about his family, but unfortunately died before he was able to do so. So it was partly for him, but it was always going to be a self-help book, so that people would understand my journey and hopefully relate to those experiences and then come out the other end with some therapeutic suggestions that will take them forward.
Well, it's a very special book. When did you realize that there was something magical happening within your book? When did you know, this is going to be a great book?
I think it was when I shared it with a number of friends. And I said, is this a vanity project of just telling stories, which is always what my history was about, telling stories and engaging people. So was that just purely a vanity project? Or was there something of value to it? And I think that when they started coming back to me and saying, this really resonates, but I want to understand deeper about the experience you had. And then when I started to go deeper, I think that's when the magic happened, when I realized that there was something of value for others. I hope that that's what people will feel, certainly.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I felt it. I mean, there were moments when we both had to stop, didn't we? There were moments you had to stop. There was even moments where I said, oh my goodness, through the talk back of the years, But it's such a personal book. You haven't held back. You've gone deep and you have been honest, which I personally really admire. I actually thought that when I was producing this book. I thought this is no holding back honesty here. Did you have to make a conscious decision to do that, or were you happy just to do it in the first place?
I was prompted to do it. My son, Elliot, and
Great
Alex,
name.
Yeah, wonderful name.
Wonderful
especially
name.
when it's Elliot James, which is your name.
Exactly the same as me.
What a coincidence, hey?
I remember actually, it's very unprofessional of me, but halfway through your brilliant narrating, you were just in the flow. I actually interrupted you and said, that's my name as well, actually. Sorry.
And it was fate, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But in answer to the question, I think it was when Elliot and Alexander came back to me and said, Dad, there is something deeper. I think you can go deeper with the emotion. So some of it was very difficult to write. And there's one particular section about my brother, which when I wrote about him, first of all, it was the good stuff. And the boy said to me, and my friend said to me, this is not real. because there were some real challenges. I worked with him for a number of years, and the parting of the ways, the professional parting of the ways, um, created a problem with our personal relationship. Um, and as an aside to that, what I found very interesting, one of the people who purchased the book and read that section about my brother said, and he had lost a relative. In fact, I think it was his father very early on, and said it resonated with him, not because of the experience that I had, but the experience my brother had of having to take over the family business as well. And that really connected with him about the understanding of how an older brother deals with that kind of loss. So that was a surprise to me.
And were you ever able to, because he would have been going through his own things at the time.
Yes.
There was what was the age difference?
7 years difference.
7 years. And he had to take on quite an authoritative role.
A fatherly role.
Yes, which you mentioned in your book. You looked up to him for that, but also had resentment for that as well. Did you ever have, and you went through a time where you weren't talking.
Yes.
Did you have a time where you were able to sit down and talk like you are to me now, so openly about the loss of your father?
Yes. And it was during that time, and it was 2 years, as you know from the book, that we were not in communication. Thankfully, his wife, Rachel, and my wife, Fran, were the, what's the right word? They were the link to keep the communication going. And in the Jewish faith, every year before the High Holy Days, which is something that's happening soon, we travel to our relatives, to the burial grounds, to pay our respects. And it was put in a book by, and I'm trying to remember the guy, it was called A Stone for Danny Fisher. And it tells the story of how when you visit the grave, you put a stone on the grave. And it was those times that we were just the two of us traveling to see our past relatives that the conversations took place, and the repair.
And the repair.
And the healing.
And the healing.
Place.
So what advice would you give to people who, now you've had that repair yourself, would you say that's essential to do? And how would someone go, in your opinion, how would they approach that if they were in a similar circumstance?
I think, communication is absolutely at the root of what I am about, because that's part of my working life. But I would say life is too short to let the pain continue, because it isn't only about what the other person is experiencing, it's about what we're experiencing, and how that, when you internalize that doesn't help our health. So if there is a dispute, and you may want to use an intermediary, as our wives were, don't leave it. Let it happen. And I've not spoken about this in the book, but it is a regret that when my brother was diagnosed with cancer, and he passed within 21 days of that diagnosis, his wife protected him from the reality of the discussion. So I never got the opportunity to talk about our lives, our experiences. We did certainly when he was well, but I think that was a missed opportunity. So that's the advice I would give to somebody. Do it now. Don't wait, because life is so fleeting, and in the COVID age, do it now.
When did you start writing the book?
Oh, my goodness. I would say that I have started writing the book from the moment that I experienced that horrifying situation of losing my dad. But it was only in the last 5 years and I wrote a book, a business book, Stand Up and Sell, which was about my experience in QVC and teaching other people how to sell
to that, definitely.
in the television. But then that gave me the courage to know that the narrative style, the storytelling style that I have, had value. And so it was really about 3 years ago that I purposely sat down, started writing the book, collating the stories, and just letting it flow. There was no decision about should it follow in chronological order. And you know better than anybody else, it's not in chronological order. And that's why I haven't called them chapters. I've called them scenes, as scenes from life.
Lovely touch, by the way.
Thank you.
You mentioned about QVC, and we should mention it, but I'm actually going to mention it in a different way. I think we can summarize that you were an expert there. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of what you did at QVC?
Well, the QVC is a shopping channel. And so I would be given a product, I would do the research on the product, and I would sit down with the presenter, as we are today, and have a discussion. I would be either the perceived expert, but what evolved was that I was like the assessor of the particular product. So the presenter, or he or she, is the everyman asking questions of me, of the so-called expert, of how to validate that particular product. And so it's live. So you had to do your research and you had to speak off the cuff. And so what came out of that was teaching other people how to present in what I call the televisual environment.
Well, this is the question I want to go to. Now, working in the audio entertainment sector, you, as I will also appreciate, and people who read what they read in magazines, that what we see on the outside is very often not what people are feeling on the inside. Now, your job would have been being up front, in front of a camera, and everybody, you're very personable. Everybody loves Dexter, which is, and they should. But you would have had to be that front person, no matter how you were feeling on that day. You had to have a smile on your face. You would have had to be excited, and you would always be open for people, like you are just as a general person. But you were carrying a Voyage Without My Father, this content within you. How difficult was it during those years for when you had, I won't say dark moments, but sad internal moments, having to be so positive and upfront externally?
It's a very interesting question. And I know that the key is authenticity. That when we are promoting a product in terms of QVC, although we may be feeling down, something may have happened that takes us right back to the pain that we experience in our lives, we have to think outside of that so that we are talking to people, we are making an emotional connection, which is true of television, of what we're doing now, and certainly when we're writing. So if you can make the emotional connection, and that is putting yourself in that person's shoes. So if I'm selling a particular product that I may not have given house room to, I would think, how would that appeal to the public that I'm speaking to? And so it's about internalizing from their perspective, not from my perspective. And I think that's what came out in the book, that yes, it's my journey, it's my pain, it's my experiences, but how is that going to impact the reader or the listener?
But what about those days when it was just hard for you? You know, let's put the people watching aside for a moment. Let's put the job aside. What about when it was just hard for you? You've experienced, in internal struggle and loss, whilst doing these wonderful, amazing things in your life, which are terrific. But how did you put them in a little back room within yourself whilst you had to be upfront and happy? How did that work?
I think the best way I can answer that is through the experience and the training that I had through the years. And one of those came from Dale Carnegie. As we know, he wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. But he also wrote a book of how to stop worrying and start living. I'm not sure if I got the title 100% right. But in that book, he talks about putting things in day-tight compartments. So that it's almost like saying to ourselves, I am feeling really down, I'm feeling very upset, or something is really going wrong, but I'm not going to think about it now. I'll think about it later. And you make a deal with yourself to say, okay, I'm in an hour's time, that's when I'm going to worry about that or think about that so I can resolve it. So it is this, and certainly I recommend reading this book. Put yourself in daytime compartments. So what you're experiencing now is what you're experiencing now.
Do you know what? That is great advice. Put it there, but deal with it then.
Yes.
So you're not just letting it build up.
Yes.
So it does lead me now to what you're doing on your day when you're not being an author and writing and here in front of the camera and doing the wonderful things. And obviously you're very active on your social media. So if you haven't joined on now, do go onto Instagram and follow you at Dexter.
I think it's Dexter.Moscow, if I remember correctly.
Dexter.Moscow. But let's talk about what you're doing now. What work are you doing? What great work are you doing?
Thank you for saying it's great work. I hope it is.
It is.
Certainly there is a lot of teaching people how to present themselves more effectively, because that's my QVC experience. And certainly in an age where a lot now is being done online through Zoom and things like that, we need that kind of, again, using that word, televisual expertise of how do we present ourselves in that environment. And part of that is looking down the camera rather than looking at yourself on the screen. So that's part of it, helping people who are going for interviews, how they present themselves in that way, or in networking situations, how they construct a presentation that is going to win them business. Not just that people are going to be interested in what they're saying, but then coming to them afterwards and saying, I think I need your help in working with whatever. One of my real motivations at the present moment, and it's evolved from the book and other experiences I've had, is a thing called positive intelligence, which actually isn't in the book. And what that is about understanding that there's lots of bad stuff that happens to us. And it's almost like what we've just talked about, daytime compartments, understanding that there are voices in our heads that are saying to us, we're going to fail, these judgmental voices, which say we're going to fail, we've never succeeded, why are you even trying? And what positive intelligence does is to turn down the volume on those voices and think in terms of other saboteurs, which are the cohorts of the judge, which can mean that we are high achievers, and that if we keep on trying to achieve, we don't recognize the benefit of the journey that we've taken. One of my saboteurs is what they call as a stickler, which I have to get everything 100% right. I have to be perfection. But perfection is for God, not for us. And so it is enough to say 70% of what I do is good enough.
And what is perfection? What's perfection to one?
And absolutely. And what is failure to one? I mean, Churchill once said that failure is one step, or success is one step beyond failure. And so we've got to fail to understand where our successes are. So a lot of what I'm doing today is, if people are frightened of public speaking, then I will use elements of positive intelligence. But relating that once again to that daytime compartments, often we will wake up in the night and the night demons will say, what are you going to do? You've got to sort this problem out. And then what positive intelligence teaches us is to say, I'm going to worry about that in the morning. Now I need to sleep. And so they are mind tricks, but they are so powerful because all we do is about mindset and the emotions that we experience.
So if, before we move on, so somebody wanted to get hold of you for something like that, how do they get hold of you?
The easiest way is to email me, dexter@dextermoscow.co.uk, and then we can chat about this positive intelligence course, which is a 6-week course, or we can just chat about what are those judgmental voices they're hearing and what are their saboteurs. And there's a saboteur assessment they can take, which defines where those problem areas are, and then we can work through it.
Now, linking with that, A Voyage Without My Father, throughout the book, there were moments in your life which took you back to your childhood moments. For example, you may need to help me out here, but I remember that a moment in the book took you back to being in the wardrobe, where you put yourself in the wardrobe, and you found everything that was in there.
Mm.
And would you say that now you've written the book, those you don't have their moments anymore?
Oh, no, I think I do. I think that, often people say about grief and the pain and the loss of someone they love that time will heal. Yes, time does heal, but it never goes away completely. So it can be a smell, it can be a color, um, anything that can zap us right the way back to that moment. The key is to say, okay, that was that moment. It isn't now. So, and there's a phrase, isn't there, that the past is a good place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And I think that's true. But the wardrobe incident was very telling. I during the what they call the Shiva, which is 7 days of mourning, people come and they give gifts, and sometimes it's chocolates, and these were Newberry berries. I don't know if they're like crystallized fruit, and I found this in the wardrobe, and I really stuffed myself sick with it, and I'd never touch one again. But when I was looking in the wardrobe, I found this card which was sent to my dad when he was in hospital. And it said, "From the gang." And there were all signatures from my brother and my brother's friends. But I wasn't on that card. My signature wasn't on that card. And you can hear.
Yes.
So that happened a long time ago. I was 10. The effect of that is still there, but do I want to necessarily revisit? No, that's an experience. I put it in the book. It still pains, and it certainly at that time caused a resentment to my brother, which we had to again work through. I think these things don't go away. It's just that we have to accept that that was hurtful at that time, but, just to carry on.
Do you have moments in your life where you feel that your father's with you?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me about those.
This sounds very strange, but if I am driving the car, or when I'm driving the car, and there is a particular situation, a problem, or something that I need to resolve going around in my head, my father's name was Elkin. And if I see a number plate, ELK, I think, okay, Dad, you've given me a message, you've given me a sign, everything will be all right. And I do talk to him. There are times, and it's very strange because, I'm now of an age where I'm many years older.
Mid-30s is fine, I mean.
I'll admit it. I'm 70. I'm in my 70s. He died when he was 45. So when I have that conversation with him, I don't see myself as that 70-plus person speaking to somebody much younger than me. I see him still as my father, even though he died when he was 45. And so, yes, I will have that conversation and take the energy and the wise thoughts. What do we call in religious aspects the still small voice? It may be that still small voice that I'm hearing rather than his voice, but in my imagination, I'm speaking to him.
Through the past 70 years, what do you think your father would say to you if he was sitting opposite you right now?
Oh, I think he would say, "You done good. You done good. You've written your history. That will be beneficial to our grandkids." He will regret never having met our grandkids, of meeting my wife or my boys. But I think he would say, "You did good. You did good."
And what would you say to him?
Thanks, Dad. No more to be said there.
So who would you say this book is for? Who's the ideal listener or reader to your book or audiobook?
It is written mainly for men because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about because, stiff upper lip and all the rest of it. And it's not necessarily a British trait. Many religions, many cultures do not talk. Men do not talk about the loss because they have to be the strong ones. So it is written for men, and it is, there's a phrase I say in the book that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. Because when we can talk about it, when we can show our emotions, then it is healing for us, and it is healing for other people. We've seen now how the princes, in their different ways, and now, 24 years after Diana's death, and I certainly refer to it in the book, that they've now started talking about it. And they've done it in such a way as they're looking for therapies that will help them through. So it is, as I say, it is written mainly for men. But having said that, men's partners, be they men or women, this book is a little bit about a handbook for them to how to deal with people who are going through those situations. And of course, women will feel it as well. That there's a section of the book which I call Other People's Lives, where I did interview other people and say, how did you deal with this loss? And it isn't just about death, it's about abandonment. It's about suicide as well, because a couple of the people I interviewed, they lost relatives and parents through suicide. So it is how to deal with that, and there are women who contributed to those elements as well.
And of course, people who need to release and share can come to you as well, and,
Yes.
and share that story and get it out through you, which is great. I'm going to ask you one last question, if I may. If you, as you are now, if you could go back in time and you've walked up the stairs and you got into the bedroom and there's a wardrobe and you open the wardrobe door and there is a 10-year-old boy in there, what would you say to that 10-year-old boy?
I would say to him that that element of seeing that card was not malicious, and and then I suppose it's my mantra for life. This too will pass. Accept what has happened, accept the pain and the tragedy, but know that this is not who you are or what motivates you. Think of who you would be as life goes on. And I had a discussion with somebody recently who said to me, resilience is something that needs to be learnt. And I said to them, no, resilience is something that we're born with. Otherwise, as children, every time we fell over, we wouldn't get up and try and walk. So we're born with resilience. So accept that as part of us. Look for the essence of who we are, not what circumstance and life throws at us. So accept what happens as a gift, and then understand what that gift is throughout our lives.
Dexter Moscow, we have had some very emotional times recording this book. We've also had a lot of laughs and a lot of eating hobnob biscuits. And it's been an absolute pleasure. We are just honoured to be publishing your audiobook and wish you a bundle of success. And everyone just needs to get in touch with you. I think it's great. So I wish you the very best, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Elliot, thank you so much. As we said right at the beginning, you've been very generous with your time and expertise, and it has been an absolute joy working with you. And I hope that joy comes over as well, because we did have some great fun. Hobnobs and your dog as well. It was wonderful.
Yeah, Denver made his way in, didn't he?
Indeed.
Well, I think we've made friends for life, and we're always here. And thanks again.
Thank you.